The great hall of the Galactic Conclave stretched for miles in every direction. Floating platforms held representatives from 12 different species, each one older than human civilization itself. Crystal chandeliers the size of mountains hung from a ceiling that looked like the night sky. This was the center of galactic power. This was where the fate of entire worlds was decided. Ambassador Yansu Park stood alone on a small platform in the middle of it all. She was 63 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen too many battles. Behind her floated a hologram of Earth, blue and green and beautiful. Around her, 1,000 alien faces, watched with expressions that ranged from pity to disgust. The human species has been a provisional member of the Interstellar Union for 40 years, the Valenthi High Speaker announced. Its body was made entirely of living crystal, and its voice echoed like wind chimes in a storm. Today we vote on whether to grant them full membership or remove them entirely. Yansu had prepared for this moment her entire life. Her grandmother had been there when humanity first made contact with the galaxy. Her mother had served in the diplomatic corps. 3 generations of Park women had worked toward this single goal. Full membership in the Union meant access to trade routes, technology, and protection. It meant humanity would finally have a seat at the table. Before we vote, the High Speaker continued, the Assembly will hear the concerns. One by one, the alien representatives spoke. The Rithkari went first. They were tall beings with 4 arms and skin like polished bronze. Their ambassador's voice dripped with contempt. Humans breed too quickly, he said. In 40 years, their population has doubled. They spread like a disease. Give them another century, and they will outnumber us all. The Morvathi representative spoke next. She was ancient, her body wrapped in robes that seemed to be made of solid shadow. They are dangerously unpredictable. Their emotions control them. They make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. This makes them unstable. More voices joined in. The Kelsari complained that humans were too aggressive. The Vanthar claimed they were too curious, always asking questions, always pushing boundaries. The Thrani said humans possessed a trait called ambition that other species found deeply disturbing. They are never satisfied, the Thrani representative said. They always want more knowledge, more territory, more power. This hunger has no end. It is dangerous. Hyansu listened to every word. She kept her face calm, but inside, her heart was breaking. These species had welcomed humanity into the galaxy. They had shared technology and knowledge. And now they were listing every human trait as if it were a crime. When they finished, the High Speaker turned to her. Ambassador Park, you may respond. Yansu took a deep breath. She thought of her grandmother, who had wept with joy when the first alien ship landed on Earth. She thought of her mother, who had spent 30 years building bridges between worlds. She thought of her daughter back home, who dreamed of one day exploring the stars. Everything you have said is true, Yansu began. The assembly fell silent. They had not expected her to agree. We do breed quickly. We are emotional. We are curious and ambitious and never satisfied. These things are not faults. They are what make us human. She stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. 40 years ago, we were throwing rockets at our own moon. Today we travel between stars. We learned your languages in a single generation. We adapted to your customs, your laws, your ways of life. We did this not because we are dangerous, but because we are determined. The Valanthi High Speaker raised a crystalline hand. Determination can become obsession. Ambition can become conquest. The Assembly has seen what happens when young species rise too quickly. Empires fall. Billions die. We will not allow humanity to become another cautionary tale. Then let us prove ourselves, Yansu pleaded. Give us another chance. Give us time? The High Speaker's voice was cold. The vote will proceed. One by one, the 12 founding species cast their decision. Yansu watched the lights appear on the massive display above. Red for rejection, green for acceptance. The first light appeared. Red, then another. Red, and another. Red. All 12 lights burned red. The vote is unanimous, the High Speaker announced. Humanity is hereby stripped of provisional membership in the Interstellar Union. All human vessels are banned from Union trade routes. Any human ship found beyond the boundaries of the Sol system will be destroyed without warning. Yansu felt the words like physical blows. Around her, some alien representatives looked away. Others smiled. Furthermore, the High Speaker continued. A containment grid designated the Veil will be constructed around the Sol system. This barrier will ensure that humanity remains where they belong. You are caging us, Yansu said quietly, like animals. We are protecting the galaxy, the High Speaker replied. From you? The human delegation began the long walk back to their ship. As they passed through the crowded halls, most aliens ignored them. Some whispered insults. A few laughed openly. The Rithkari ambassador stepped into their path. He towered over Yansu, his forearms crossed over his broad chest. A cruel smile twisted his bronze features. Enjoy your cage, little species, he said. In 1,000 years, you will still be throwing rocks at your moon. Your kind will fade into nothing, and the galaxy will forget you ever existed. Yansu looked up at him. She did not blink. She did not cry. She simply nodded once and walked past him without a word. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of grief. When their ship finally landed in Geneva, the entire World Council was waiting. President Chen Wei stood at the front of the assembly. He was a small man with kind eyes, but today those eyes were hard as stone. He had watched the vote on live broadcast. Every human on Earth had watched. They have cast us out, President Chen said. They have built a cage around our world. They expect us to wither and die in isolation. He paused, looking at every face in the room. They are wrong. The room erupted in chaos. Some demanded war. Others called for acceptance. Voices shouted over voices until President Chen raised his hand for silence. We will not fight them, he said. Not yet. We will not beg them. Never again. We will do something they never expected. We will do what humans have always done when the world turns against us. He turned to the massive screen behind him. On it appeared blueprints, plans, and designs that had been hidden for decades. Secret projects. Forbidden research. The foundations of something new. They have given us the greatest gift imaginable, President Chen said. They have given us a reason to become something greater than we ever dreamed. His next words would echo through history. They want us to fade in silence. Instead, we will build in darkness. And when we emerge, the galaxy will tremble. The screen went dark. The age of exile had begun. 100 years passed behind the veil. The galaxy forgot about humanity. The Interstellar Union continued its endless politics. Trade routes expanded. New species were discovered and welcomed into the fold. The small blue planet locked away in a distant corner of space became nothing more than a footnote in history books. A failed experiment. A species that could not control its own nature. The Velanthi High Speaker, now ancient even by crystal standards. Sometimes thought about the human ambassador who had stood before him a century ago. He wondered if any humans were still alive. Or if they had destroyed themselves as so many young species did. He would have been terrified to learn the truth. Director Kira Okonkwo stood on the observation deck of Prometheus Station, looking out at a sight that would have driven the galaxy mad with fear. Before her stretched the largest shipyard in human history. Massive vessels hung in the darkness like sleeping giants. Construction drones swarmed around them by the millions. And this was just one of 17 hidden facilities scattered across human space. Status report, Kira said. She was 72 years old, but genetic treatments had given her the body of a 40-year-old. Her mind was sharper than ever. The Titan-class carriers are ahead of schedule, her assistant replied. We can begin fleet exercises next month, Kira nodded. 100 years of work. 100 years of sacrifice. 100 years of building in absolute silence. And they were finally ready. The galaxy believed humans were trapped in their home system, slowly dying. They had no idea that humanity had spread across 3 hidden sectors of space. Mars was green now, covered in forests and oceans. Cities floated in the clouds of Venus. Mining operations carved through the asteroid belt. And beyond the edges of the Sol system in places the Union's sensors could not reach. Humanity had built an empire. It had started with desperation. In the early years after exile, humanity had poured every resource into survival. Scientists worked day and night to reverse engineer the alien technology it acquired during their 40 years of membership. Engineers found ways to improve upon designs that were already thousands of years old. Physicists discovered principles of space travel that the Union had never even imagined. The breakthrough came in the 37th year of exile. A young engineer named Jin Woo created something impossible. He called it the Ghost Drive. Jin Woo had been studying the Veil, the sensor grid that surrounded the Sol system. The Union had designed it to detect any known form of faster-than-light travel. But Ginwoo discovered that space had layers, like an onion. The Veil only watched the outer layer. If a ship could slip between the layers, folding through dimensions that the Union did not even know existed, it could pass through completely undetected. The first ghost ship launched on the 40th anniversary of exile. It carried a crew of 12 volunteers who knew they might never return. They slipped through the veil like shadows through moonlight. They traveled to the nearest Union outpost and watched from the darkness. Then they came home with a message that changed everything. The galaxy had not improved in 40 years. The Union was still the same arrogant, stagnant organization it had always been. The same species held power. The same rules governed everything. While humanity had been forced to evolve, the galaxy had stood still. From that day forward, human observers spread across the stars. They watched everything. They learned everything. They documented every species, every planet, every weakness. They mapped trade routes and military positions. They studied alien languages and cultures. And through it all, they remained invisible. Kira had been born on Titan, one of Saturn's moons. She had never seen Earth's sky except in photographs, but she had memorized every word of Ambassador Yansu Park's final speech before the assembly. Every child in the Hidden Empire learned it in school. They learned about the day humanity was cast out. They learned about the cage that was built around their ancestors. And they learned the mission that united them all. Wait. Prepare. Remember what they did to us now. 100 years later, the waiting was almost over. An alarm chimed on Kira's console. She frowned and tapped the screen. A priority message from the Observer Corps appeared. Director, the voice said. We have a situation. The holographic display shifted to show a star map. Red markers appeared across Union space, spreading like a disease. What am I looking at? Kira asked. 3 months ago, something emerged from the void between galaxies. We have designated it the Kethvoran Swarm. It appears to be a hive-mind organism of unknown origin. It is consuming everything in its path. Kira watched the red markers spread. Entire systems disappeared. Billions of lives gone in days. Union response? She asked. Ineffective. The Volanthi lost their homeworld yesterday. The Rithkari fleet has been destroyed. The Galactic Conclave is in emergency session, but they are unable to coordinate a defense. Director, the Union is falling. Kira closed her eyes. Part of her felt satisfaction. These were the species that had caged humanity. They had called humans animals. They had laughed as the human delegation walked away in shame. Now they were dying, and humanity had the power to help or watch. But another part of her felt something different. Something unexpected. She thought of the old recordings she had studied. Ambassador Park, standing alone before the assembly. A single woman against the galaxy, fighting for her people with nothing but words. Park had lost that day, but she had never lost her dignity. She had never lost her humanity. What would Ambassador Park want them to do now? Kira opened her eyes. Get me the council, she said. We need to have a conversation. The debate lasted for 3 days. Some argued that humanity should let the Union burn. They caged us like animals, one counselor shouted. They said we would fade into nothing. Let them see how it feels to face extinction. Others disagreed. If we let them die, we become exactly what they feared, another voice replied. We become monsters. In the end, it was Minji Park who settled the matter. She was the granddaughter of Ambassador Yansu Park, now 97 years old, but still sharp as a blade. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. My grandmother stood before the galaxy and showed them who we are, Minji said. Her voice was quiet, but everyone listened. She showed them that humans could be brave in the face of injustice, merciful in the face of cruelty, strong in the face of despair. She did not beg. She did not threaten. She simply stood tall and spoke the truth. Minji looked at every face in the room. Now we have a choice. We can prove that the galaxy was right about us. Or we can prove that my grandmother was right about us. We can be the monsters they feared. Or we can be the people she believed we could become. The vote was close. But in the end, humanity chose mercy. 1 week later, a fleet of 300 human warships approached the Valanthia refugee convoy. They were the largest, most advanced vessels the galaxy had ever seen. They should not have existed. They should have been impossible. A single transmission broadcast across all frequencies. This is the United Earth Federation. We remember what you did to us. We are here anyway. You are welcome. The age of shadows was over. The age of reckoning had begun. The Valanthi High Speaker had lived for 800 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds. He had stood at the center of galactic power for centuries. Confident in the eternal strength of the interstellar union, now he floated in a damaged escape pod. Watching his homeworld burn, the crystal cities of Valanthos had stood for 10,000 years. They had been the most beautiful structures in the known galaxy. Towers of living light that sang with the voices of countless generations. The Kethvoran swarm had consumed them in 3 days. Billions of Valanthi had been absorbed into the hive mind. Their consciousness dissolved into the endless hunger of the swarm. The High Speaker was one of the few survivors. His crystalline body was cracked and dim. His light was fading. And as he drifted through the debris field that had once been his world, he prepared himself for death. Then the human ships appeared. They emerged from nowhere, tearing holes in reality itself. Massive vessels of impossible design, bristling with weapons that should not exist. They moved through space like predators, swift and deadly, and utterly silent. The High Speaker stared in disbelief. Humanity was supposed to be dead. Humanity was supposed to be caged in their little solar system, throwing rocks at their moon. How was this possible? A beam of light locked onto his escape pod and drew it toward the largest vessel. The High Speaker passed through a shimmering energy field and found himself inside a hangar bay larger than some cities. Human soldiers in advanced armor surrounded him, and standing at the front of them was a woman with silver hair and eyes that held no warmth. "I am Admiral Minji Park of the United Earth Federation," she said. "We are here to help." The High Speaker's voice crackled with static. You should be dead." The veil. The veil was a cage built by frightened children, Admiral Park replied. "We outgrew it decades ago. We have been watching you ever since. Watching us, ... Watching you learn." Admiral Park's eyes softened slightly. "We considered letting you face the consequences of your arrogance alone. Many of my people wanted exactly that. But we decided that becoming monsters to punish monsters would make us no better than you." The High Speaker had no response. For the first time in his long life, he felt shame. Meanwhile, Commander Alexei Volkov led the human fleet into battle. He was 45 years old, born on a colony ship in the depths of interstellar space. He had trained his entire life for this moment. He had studied every recording of the Kethforan swarm's attacks, analyzed their patterns, learned their tactics, and he had discovered something that the Union had missed in their panic. The swarm was not invincible. It was just fighting an enemy that had forgotten how to adapt. "All wings, execute pattern Delta," Volkov commanded. Human ships scattered in what appeared to be chaos. 2 Union observers watching from a distance, it looked like madness. The swarm's predictive algorithms agreed. It calculated that the human fleet would be easy prey. It was wrong. Pattern Delta was not random. It was controlled chaos, a dance that only humans could perform. Each ship captain had the freedom to make independent decisions within a loose framework. They could adapt in real time, respond to changing conditions, take risks that no algorithm could predict. The swarm had consumed 1,000 civilizations. Every one of them had fought with order, with structure, with predictable patterns. Humans fought like fire, like wind, like wild animals cornered and desperate. They broke every rule of conventional warfare, and they were winning, the swarm. Queen felt something she had not experienced in millennia. Confusion. She reached out with her vast psychic network, attempting to dominate the human commanders as she had dominated so many species before. Her consciousness crashed against their minds like waves against a cliff, and for the first time in her ancient existence, she was repelled. Human minds were chaos. They were filled with contradictions, with emotions, with irrational thoughts and impossible dreams. They did not think in straight lines. They did not follow predictable paths. Every single human was a universe of madness, and the Queen could not find purchase in that storm. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Volkov smiled as he felt the psychic attack slide off his consciousness like water off stone. Was that supposed to hurt? He asked no one in particular. The Battle of Valanthos lasted for 12 hours. When it was over, the swarm had retreated for the first time in recorded history. The refugee convoy was safe, and the galaxy finally understood what humanity had become. In the aftermath, representatives from 17 different species requested emergency meetings with human commanders. They came with gifts, with promises, with desperate pleas for alliance. The proud empires that had once laughed at humanity now begged for protection. Admiral Park received them all with cold courtesy. She listened to their offers. She noted their fear, and she gave them nothing but the truth. "We are not here to save you," she told the assembled delegates. "We are not here for revenge. We are here because 100 years ago, my grandmother stood before your assembly and showed you what humanity could be. Today, we will show you that she was right." The Rithkari ambassador, grandson of the one who had mocked humanity a century ago, fell to his knees before her. "We were wrong," he said. "We judged you by our fears instead of your actions. We caged you like animals when you deserved to stand among us as equals. Please, forgive us." Admiral Park looked at him for a long moment. She thought of her grandmother who had walked past his ancestor without a word. She thought of the century of darkness, the hidden empire, the countless humans who had lived and died never knowing the light of Earth's sun. She thought of all the reasons she had to let this man and his entire species face extinction. Then she reached down and helped him to his feet. "Forgiveness is earned," she said, "not given. But we will give you the chance to earn it. Fight beside us. Prove that you are worthy of the alliance you once denied us. And perhaps, when this war is over, we can build something better together." The Rithkari ambassador looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "Why?" he asked. "After everything we did to you, why would you help us?" Admiral Park smiled for the first time. "Because that is what humans do," she said. "We survive. We adapt. And when the universe gives us every reason to become monsters, we choose to become something better." The war against the swarm had begun, and humanity was leading the charge. The Nexus of Orion was the most important strategic position in the galaxy. 7 major trade routes intersected there. Whoever controlled the Nexus controlled the flow of supplies, reinforcements, and information across 3 sectors. The Kethvoran swarm knew this. That was why they had sent everything they had to take it. Commander Alexei Volkov stood on the bridge of the UEF Defiance, watching the enemy fleet approach. His tactical display showed over 10,000 swarm vessels, a wall of organic ships that blotted out the stars. Behind them came the hive ships, massive living structures that served as the swarm's mobile command centers, and at the very back, protected by layers of defenders, floated the Queen's flagship, a moon-sized organism that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Against this armada, Volkov had 300 human ships and a handful of allied vessels from species that had finally chosen to stand with humanity. "Commander," his tactical officer said, "the odds are not in our favor." Volkov smiled. "They never are. That's what makes it interesting." The Battle of Orion's Nexus began at dawn by Galactic Standard Time. The swarm attacked with overwhelming force, expecting the human fleet to crumble as every other fleet had crumbled before. They were wrong. Human ships did not fight like other species. They did not form neat lines or follow predictable patterns. They fought like wolves, striking from unexpected angles, withdrawing before the enemy could respond, then striking again from somewhere else. Every captain had the authority to make independent decisions. Every crew could adapt to changing conditions without waiting for orders from above. Dr. Yuki Tanaka watched the battle from a research vessel hidden behind an asteroid. She was not a soldier. She was a xenobiologist, and she had been studying the swarm since the war began. While the fleet fought, she analyzed every piece of data her sensors could collect. And slowly she began to understand something extraordinary. The swarm was a hive mind. Every organism was connected to every other organism. They shared thoughts, memories, and experiences. This made them incredibly coordinated. It also made them incredibly predictable. The Queen controlled everything. She processed information from millions of individual units and issued commands that were followed without question. It was an efficient system. It had conquered 1,000 civilizations, but it had a weakness. The swarm could not comprehend individuality. Every calculation the Queen made was based on the assumption that enemies would act logically, predictably, in their own self-interest. She could not understand creatures who would sacrifice themselves for others. She could not predict behavior that was based on emotion rather than logic. YUK opened a channel to Commander Volkov. "Commander, I think I know how to beat them." Volkov listened to her explanation while simultaneously directing 3 different battle groups. It was the kind of multitasking that would have driven most species insane. For humans, it was Tuesday. "You're saying if we act irrationally, we become invisible to her predictions?" He asked. "Not invisible. Incomprehensible. She literally cannot model behavior that prioritizes others over self. Every time one of our people sacrifices themselves to save their comrades, her algorithms break down. She has to recalculate everything from scratch." Volkov was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. "Doctor, you just described the fundamental nature of human warfare. We've been fighting like that since we lived in caves." The battle reached its turning point 6 hours in. The swarm had pushed the human fleet back to the Nexus itself. Defensive stations were falling. Ships were dying. The Queen, sensing victory, committed her reserves. That was when Captain Daejung made his choice, his ship. The UEF Hammer of Earth had taken heavy damage. Engines were failing. Weapons were offline. Most of his crew was dead, but his sensors still worked, and he could see the Queen's flagship approaching the Nexus. "All hands," he announced over the internal comm. "This is the captain. If anyone wants to reach the escape pods, you have 2 minutes. No one will think less of you." No one moved. "Then let's make this count." The Hammer of Earth turned toward the Queen's flagship. Its remaining engines fired at maximum power. The swarm tried to stop it, but human ships threw themselves into the path of interceptors. Creating a corridor of sacrifice, Captain Daejung's last transmission was broadcast across the entire fleet. "We don't die for glory," he said. "We die for each other. Long live humanity." The Hammer of Earth struck the Queen's flagship at nearly the speed of light. The explosion was visible from 100 light-years away. The Queen's flagship, the brain of the entire swarm, was obliterated in an instant. 10,000 swarm ships suddenly lost their connection to the hive mind. They stopped fighting. They stopped moving. They just drifted, mindless and lost. The Queen was not dead. She had transferred her consciousness to another vessel moments before impact. But she was wounded, confused, and terrified for the first time in millennia. She ordered a retreat, and the swarm fled into the darkness between stars. The Nexus of Orion was saved. in the aftermath. Admiral Park addressed the combined fleet. Human ships floated alongside Volanthe cruisers, Rithkari battleships, and vessels from a dozen other species. They had fought together. They had bled together. And they had won together. "Today we proved something important," Admiral Park said. "We proved that the galaxy can stand united against any threat. We proved that species who were once enemies can become allies. And we proved that humanity's greatest strength is not our technology or our tactics." She paused, looking at the field of debris that marked Captain Dejung's final resting place. "Our greatest strength is our willingness to sacrifice for those we love, not just our own people. All people. Every species that stands with us becomes our family, and humans will do anything for family." The surviving leaders of the Interstellar Union requested a formal summit. For the first time in a century, humans and the species who had exiled them would sit at the same table. But this time, everything had changed. The species that had once judged humanity came not as masters, but as equals. Some came as students, eager to learn how humans thought, how they fought, how they turned weakness into strength. A few came as friends, their old prejudices burned away by the fires of war. Admiral Park agreed to the summit, but she made one thing clear. "We will not beg for acceptance," she told the assembled delegates. "We will not ask for forgiveness. We will offer you something better. We will offer you a future built on respect instead of fear, partnership instead of dominion, unity instead of division." She smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like her grandmother. "The old Union is dead. Long live the Commonwealth." The Great Hall of the Galactic Conclave looked exactly as it had 100 years ago. The same floating platforms, the same crystal chandeliers, the same ceiling that resembled the night sky, but everything had changed. Where 12 species had once sat in judgment, now representatives from 47 worlds gathered in hope. Where Ambassador Yansu Park had once stood alone, defending humanity against accusations of unworthiness, now Fleet Admiral Mingy Park stood at the head of the table. Surrounded by allies who had once been enemies, the Valenthi High Speaker was the first to address the assembly. His crystalline body was still cracked from the destruction of his homeworld, but his light burned brighter than ever. 100 years ago, this chamber witnessed a great injustice, he began. "We stood in judgment of humanity and found them unworthy. We called them dangerous, unpredictable, ambitious. We built a cage around their world and expected them to fade into nothing." He paused, looking directly at Admiral Park. "We were fools." A murmur passed through the assembly. No species had ever admitted wrongdoing in this chamber before. While we sat in our comfortable empires, believing ourselves superior, humanity grew stronger in the darkness we forced upon them. While we stagnated, they evolved. While we forgot how to fight, they mastered the art of war. And when the greatest threat our galaxy has ever known emerged from the void, it was humanity who stood against it, not us. The High Speaker lowered himself to one knee, a gesture of deep respect in Valanthi culture. "I come today not to judge, but to ask. Not to demand, but to request. Humanity showed us mercy when they had every right to seek vengeance. Now we must prove ourselves worthy of that mercy. Whatever humanity asks of us, we will give. However they wish to reshape the galaxy, we will follow." Admiral Park listened in silence. She had imagined this moment many times. In her dreams, she had delivered speeches of righteous anger. She had made the species who had wronged her grandmother grovel and beg. She had remade the galaxy in humanity's image, but dreams were not real. And the woman she had become was not the woman she had once imagined. "Stand up," she said quietly. The High Speaker looked up, confused. "Stand up," Admiral Park repeated. "We did not fight this war so that other species would kneel to us. We fought this war so that all species could stand together as equals." She stepped forward, offering her hand to the ancient crystalline being. After a moment of hesitation, the High Speaker took it and rose to his feet. "My grandmother stood in this very chamber 100 years ago," Admiral Park said, her voice carrying to every corner of the Great Hall. She defended humanity not with threats or displays of power, but with truth. She told you who we really are. You did not listen. She released the High Speaker's hand and turned to face the entire assembly. Today, I will tell you the same thing she did. Humanity is emotional. We are unpredictable. We're ambitious and curious and never satisfied. These are not weaknesses. They are the source of our greatest strength. You feared our ambition, but that ambition drove us to build an empire in secret, to develop technology beyond anything you had ever imagined. You feared our emotions, but those emotions gave us the courage to sacrifice ourselves for strangers, to show mercy to those who had wronged us. You feared our unpredictability, but that unpredictability allowed us to defeat an enemy that had never lost a battle in a million years. Admiral Park smiled, and for a moment, everyone in the chamber saw the ghost of her grandmother standing beside her. We do not want your submission. We do not want your worship. We want what we have always wanted, a seat at the table, a voice in the conversation. The chance to build something better than what came before. She raised her hand, and a holographic display appeared above the assembly. It showed a new organizational structure, a new form of galactic government. The Interstellar Union was built on fear. Fear of young species rising too fast. Fear of change. Fear of the unknown. That fear led you to cage us. It led you to stagnate while the galaxy grew more dangerous. And when the swarm came, that fear nearly destroyed you all. The Galactic Commonwealth will be built on trust. Every species will have equal representation. Decisions will be made together, not imposed from above. And no species will ever be cast out simply for being different. The vote was unanimous. The old union was dissolved. The Galactic Commonwealth was born. 3 months later, the Kethovoran swarm launched its final attack. The Queen had rebuilt her forces in the darkness between galaxies. She had absorbed new species, grown new ships, and prepared for revenge. This time, she would not underestimate her enemies. But this time, her enemies were ready. The battle took place in orbit around Earth itself. The Queen had chosen this location deliberately. She would destroy the human homeworld and break the spirit of the new Commonwealth before it could truly form. Instead, she found herself facing a fleet unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships fought alongside Volanthi cruisers. Rithkari battleships coordinated with Morvathi's shadow vessels. 47 species, once divided by fear and prejudice, now stood united against a common enemy. They fought not as separate races, but as one people. The Queen tried her psychic attacks again. She reached out to dominate the minds of the Allied commanders. And this time she found something even more terrifying than human chaos. She found unity. 47 different species, thinking together, fighting together, sacrificing together. Not a hive mind like her own, controlled by a single will. A true alliance, where individuals chose to stand with each other. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was something she could never comprehend. The final blow came from a coordinated attack involving every ship in the Allied fleet. Humans and Volanthi and Rithkari and dozens of others, moving as one without losing their individuality. The Queen had conquered civilizations that fought alone. She could not defeat civilizations that fought together. Her death was not dramatic. There was no final speech, no last curse. She simply ceased to exist, overwhelmed by something she had never encountered in a million years of conquest. Hope. 5 years later, a young girl walked through a memorial garden on Earth. Statues lined the paths, honoring the heroes of the war. Human names stood alongside alien names. All were remembered. All were honored. The girl stopped before a statue of an old woman standing tall before a hostile crowd. The plaque read, Ambassador Yansu Park, who showed the galaxy what humanity could be. Grandmother, the girl said to the elderly woman, walking beside her, what was it like when humans were alone? Admiral Minji Park, now retired, looked down at her great-granddaughter with gentle eyes. We were never alone, she said. We just had not met our family yet. The girl smiled and took her grandmother's hand. Together, they walked through the garden, past the statues of heroes from 100 worlds. Above them, The sky was full of ships from every corner of the galaxy, coming and going in peace. They cast humanity out, expecting silence and death. Instead, humanity built an empire in darkness. And when they emerged, they did not bring vengeance. They brought the dawn.